UKIP leader Nigel Farage has set out his stall ahead of the general election, saying he feels optimistic and upbeat. Among his proposals are to scrap HS2 and back the Tories' deficit reduction plan. Let's find out why. Mr Farage now joins us live from conference in Margate. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr Farage, waiting patiently there for us. Time really ahead of the election for your party and you as its leader to define yourselves across a broad spectrum of policies so the voters can have a chance to make up their minds. Have you done that yet? Are you ready to do that yet?
Yeah, and we have been doing it. You know, we've laid out NHS policy. We've talked about deficit reduction. We've obviously talked about immigration in the wake of yesterday's appalling figures. And we will, as time goes on, talk more about defence, education, welfare, and, you know, the whole range of issues. What we need, of course, is to be given a fair chance to get those views across.
Well, so in terms of defining yourselves as a party and you as a leader, so far, the impression the public must be getting is that you are an extreme right-wing party. You've just come back from the States to a conference hall in Maryland to talk to the far right of the Republican side of things over there. You now say you back the Tory spending plans. So doesn't that make it harder for you to wander around the north of England and claim that you're a man of the working class voter?
Well, as you may have seen this afternoon, when I finished my speech, I introduced Harriet Yeo as the next speaker. She was chairman of the Labour Party's national executive in this country just 2 years ago. And the point about UKIP that the commentators can't get their brains around is that we've crossed the divides of left and right in politics. We've crossed the divides of class in politics. You know, some things matter more than the old-fashioned labels of left and right. And the idea that we should run our own country, control our own borders, start acting in the interests of the little man and woman. These things aren't about left and right, but they are about right and wrong.
So does that mean that should it come to a Labour win or a Conservative win in terms of the number of votes at the next election, but they need a little bit of a partnership with someone else, that you don't really mind whether you go into partnership with Ed Miliband or with David Cameron?
Well, let me be clear. My priority is to fight that election on May the 7th and win as many MPs as possible. Thereafter, it would be, at the moment, impossible for us to support Ed Miliband in any way at all, because he's turned his back on the idea that the people of this country should have a referendum on our membership of the European Union. So unless that Labour policy changes, there is no chance of us providing them with any support at all.
So does that explain why, really, backing the Tory party spending plans today means that you're putting yourself on offer to the Tories should they need a bit of help to put themselves in government?
I mean, let's be clear. The Tory spending plans for this Parliament meant the deficit should have disappeared altogether, and it's still running at £90 billion a year. And in fact, you know, in these 5 years as Chancellor, George Osborne has doubled the national debt. What we are saying is the proposals that Osborne has put forward are similar to this Parliament. If we're there and we have any influence, we will hold their feet to the fire to make sure that this actually happens.
Still thinking that you're a bit on single-issue politics, though, with still the issues of NHS, education, defence, all yet to be dealt with. Thus far, the evidence for the average voter is that you are a party of the right.
Oh, no, we've talked about the NHS. We've talked about extra money for the NHS, which we can get by not pouring £55 million a day as our contribution to Brussels. We've also talked about removing car parking charges in our hospitals. We're laying out a full manifesto.
Nevertheless, there's going to come a point, isn't there, between now and May where you're going to have to drift in one direction or other and maybe start losing out on some of those Labour voters that you're hoping will come over to you like they did in the by-election about a year ago.
I am not drifting in any direction. What UKIP stands for is absolutely at the centre ground of common sense and where many, many British people are. Left and right are old-fashioned labels. They are now completely meaningless in British politics, and certainly meaningless in a country where 75% of our laws now get made somewhere else. They're made in Brussels. We want Britain to be self-governing, self-confident, and let's actually stand up once again and be a proper global trading nation.
Stand up how? What's your vision for all this to come into place? Say that you get 10, perhaps 12 seats at the election and you do join a governing party in government. What role will you play in that?
Well, the role we would play is to make sure the British people actually get a referendum, they get it quickly, and they get it on the right terms so that it's not a stitch-up the way that it was back in 1975. And my worry is that if Mr Cameron is in a position of power after this election, he will attempt to stitch us up. Our job is to get enough MPs in there to make sure he can't do that.
Well, he may well do. He may decide that, OK, he will take you on board, but he puts you in charge of education and one of your colleagues in charge of pensions or something.
No.
He doesn't let you anywhere near the things that you want to talk about.
Can I be absolutely clear? You know, we are not aiming to be in coalition government. I'm not looking for a ministerial car, but I am looking to try and drive the agenda.
Do you think you can do that?
Well, if we win enough seats, yes. And all I can say to you is that we have surpassed all expectations over the course of the last few years. When I said we'd win the European elections, people laughed very loudly. When we got the defectors, Carswell and Reckless that came to us, everybody said we had no chance of winning the Rochester by-election, and we did. There is a growing level of support for UKIP out there. We are the People's Army. We are taking on the establishment, and we're very determined, and we will surprise you once again.
Well, you say that, but there have been protests at your conference today. There were protests up in Gateshead recently. You yourself have now put in a bid for some police security to make your trips a bit easier to deal with, because the protests are, and don't tell me it's just a minority, because they're pretty consistent, the protests are pretty rough on you.
Well, the protests are very rough, and that's because the trade union movement in this country has a lot of money, and they have to have someone to hate. They used to protest against the BNP. They virtually disappeared, so they're trying to tag UKIP with that same label. It simply isn't right. It simply isn't true. We are a non-racist, non-sectarian political party. We are for everybody, but we are for one Britain, and a self-governing one at that.
But that's Nigel Farage, no friend of the unions. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would be very happy to sit down and talk to the trade unions, but sadly, the modern-day unions have become corporatist. They've fallen very much in love with the Brussels agenda. Ironically, they're rather closer to big business these days than they used to be, and I don't think the trade union movement today actually represents the interests of ordinary working people.
Nigel Farage, thanks very much indeed for joining us this afternoon on Sky News.